Physician welcomes you to House Call. Our hosts today are doctors of chiropractic, Dr. Gerald Lala and Dr. Richard Jensen, who is also a board-certified acupuncturist, practice independently in Shoreview, Minnesota. Let's join our hosts for today's program that will assist you in your quest for optimum health and well-being.
Welcome to House Call. I'm Dr. Gerald Lala.
And I'm Dr. Richard Jensen.
It's great to have you with us again on this dimension of House Call. Thank you for inviting us into your home or workplace or wherever you might be. And we also welcome all of the people who are watching us throughout the United States of America and around the globe as the program goes to all ends of the earth. So we're happy to have you with us. And interestingly, if you're not familiar with Shoreview, Minnesota, it's the gateway to the north coast of America. And that's Lake Superior, of course. So do come and visit Minnesota, and if you're going to be in the Shoreview area, invite you to come and visit us too. As the screen has said, we're going to talk about automobile accident checklist. Certainly, we don't ever want to be in an automobile collision or accident, but sometimes it happens. Doesn't necessarily have to be our fault or anything, but many times people it's an accident, it's a collision, things happen, and sometimes we don't keep presence of mind, which is logical. And so we're going to go through a checklist that we invite you to keep within the glove box of your car, someplace in the car, so that you remember to check things, because there's a statement that we have that's called out of sight, out of mind. So we're going to start with this checklist, and as a chiropractic physician, certainly Dr. Jensen and I are well aware of people who were injured in an automobile accident, as we see many of them in our clinic, and we're happy that chiropractic often helps them, at least the approach that we take. So, Dr. Jensen, what are some of the first steps that a person should take, assuming they're conscious and they're after being involved in an automobile collision?
Right. Well, thank you, Dr. Lala. Some of the first steps that you want is, one, remain calm. It's always important to remain calm, not to let go of your mind while you're in that. Of course, it's a very stressful situation, and one that hopefully you never had to go through before, and unfortunately you have to go through this time. But remember to remain calm, as in all kinds of accidents. Second is to get to a safe place. If you're in an automobile accident, you don't want to stand out in the middle of the road. Remember, there's a lot of times where there's gawkers that are driving by, and many times they're finding that there is a trend that when people drive where they look, and so if they're gawking at the accident, looking to the side, they tend to steer that way a little bit, and sometimes we end up having secondary accidents on top of those, just from people having interest in what's going on. Sometimes, it's to make sure that everybody's okay, that kind of thing. Thirdly is to check for injuries. Check for injuries within yourself. You want to check to make sure you're not bleeding, for one. Check for those who are with you to make sure they're okay, in case you can do that. Another one is to administer first aid, and there are some people out there who are first responders that can definitely assist you if you let them. And then also call police, call an EMT, get them to the place. It's always a good idea to call the police to the scene of an accident. At least then there is an accident report. A lot of times when you're first in a collision, your adrenal glands take over, and the situation just makes it so you don't initially feel pain. And many times it's not till after the first week or so that people start to really feel the effects of the accident, because they're still up on that adrenaline, and it's not until the adrenal glands start to fatigue that you start to feel that. So if it's a week later and you start to have these symptoms, and then it hasn't been any police report at all, then you found yourself not being covered like you should. Next of all, never ever say, "It's not my fault." Or on the flip side of that, never say it is my fault either. Okay, let that come out afterwards, after everything's said and done. It's always better to just leave those things alone and let the accident speak for itself. Okay. Don't say my insurance will pay for everything. It's just not a good idea to say that. It sets you up for problems that can affect you down the line. Another one is, it's okay, I have full coverage. Don't ever say those types of things. Dr. Lala, any further?
Yes, while at the scene, we'd encourage you to get as much information as possible on the list. If you have a camera with you, which is very common for many people today, take pictures, and when hopefully the police are called, and when they do come, cooperate and tell them what you know. Always tell the truth. Then we want to also focus then on what we refer to as accident details. Certainly the date, the day, the date, the time. Was it morning or evening, AM or PM? What was the weather like and the road conditions and the location and the accident details? Now these things, we always ask these things on automobile collision people or accident victims when they come into our clinic, because it's very important. And if you're going to a medical doctor or chiropractor, they should be acquiring this information very specifically. And then hopefully you'll want to have a description, some type of description of the damages that have occurred. Now, the other vehicle, that includes the other vehicle and the towing company name and their address if, in fact, a towing company was called. Now, we encourage you, if you, regardless if you've had any back or joint injuries, that you would consult with a reputable chiropractor, because there are different kinds of surgeons, different types of medical doctors, different types of chiropractors, and some are very, very good at what they do, and they're very, very skilled at doing the right job in people who've been involved in automobile accidents. And certainly the information that we're talking about here is very important. And we encourage you to get to a doctor of chiropractic who really has a specialty in the ins and outs of diagnosis and proper treatment of people with automobile accident injuries. Even if you're not having any problem, still good to get your spine, your joints checked out by a reputable doctor of chiropractic. Sometimes there are initial early onset symptoms of head pain or neck pain or mid or low back pain, shoulder pain, extremity pains, and other times there aren't, because your adrenaline kicks in and endorphins kick in, anti-pain neurotransmitters they're called, and you say, gee, I feel good, I don't want any problems, I feel good, I'm afraid my insurance company will cancel me, or something like that. Well, insurance company can't cancel you. They can't cancel you if you've been in an accident. And certainly if you don't have it checked out, the longer the time between the date of the accident and when you do go to a doctor or chiropractic, that length of time says to the insurance company, gee, this person says they were in an accident. We know that 6 months ago or a year ago, and now they're having trouble. Well, and logically, they could question that too. So there are sometimes late onset symptoms. And as I said, there are a lot of different types of chiropractors, and they all have their own idiosyncrasies or niches. But some, you want to stay away from those who are snap 'em and crack 'em people that don't really do a good orthopedic, physical, postural, neurological workup. And if you don't examine, you don't know what's going on. The same thing holds true in most cases. If you don't x-ray, you can't see what's going on inside of that body. And many times there are injuries to joints, including the spine, that are asymptomatic initially, but the x-ray will show that there have been injuries there and that they should be correctly addressed. And then you want to be careful of chiropractors that seem to have a close relationship with certain attorneys or with certain other chiropractors or physical therapists or massage therapists, and that there may be some systems going on there, and we would technically call that fraud, but a lot of times they're schmoozers and they've got some under the table thing going on, and you need to be very, very careful about that. And then some chiropractors have a real short-term mentality in that they're just interested in lots of care initially and not thinking about what are the long-term possible negative effects. So with that in mind, Dr. Jensen is going to talk about the other vehicle now, some considerations there, or maybe has something else to add to what I'm saying.
Well, I think it's that you brought up a real interesting point is, when we're assessing damage, it's necessary to have yourself assessed. And when you start out right after the accident, it should be a good thing to have yourself checked out right away. But then as time goes by, other symptoms may appear. And at that time, it's good to have another examination, actually, that the doctor should re-examine you.
Yeah, many times they'll say, well, I'll take aspirin or Tylenol or Advil or something, and the symptoms go away.
Oh, sure.
Well, that's not curing the problem. The cause is still there.
I've heard it described that many times painkillers are like cutting the check engine light on the car, saying that the car is fixed.
Or putting frosting on top of burnt cake.
Yeah,
Burnt cake is still there.
The burnt cake is still there. It's still going to taste foul. So in that regard, it's better to have each thing checked out as it comes up so that it is documented. What I'm looking at is here we have the length of duration between the accident and between when a person shows up in your office. That the insurance company can look at that as being suspect. Did the injury, in fact, come from the accident? Well, if you're checked out right away and as symptoms show up, they can document whether you were in something else or not, too, so that also leaves a trail for the insurance company to show that you're just not coming forth with any old thing that may have happened since.
And if it's checked out initially and basically there's no problem, at least it's established with the insurance company, then an exam and x-rays are made.
You're right.
And if something occurs 6 months, 7 or 8 months down the road, at least you say, gee, we had these issues back then, so we had some documentation of it.
Now, in some cases, if there's a new injury that has occurred, pain that's just not going away, that within particular motions, it would still be called for to re-x-ray in some cases, because some fractures, such as hairline fractures, may not show up on the initial x-rays, but within 6 weeks later, you start to have a bone callus forming, which is then very evident on the x-ray. And so therefore, it's better to have that documented also.
Really, the mass majority of the people that we see with chronic back problems, and they'll say, well, I don't know where it came from. Well, when you dig back into their past medical history, you find out that they were in some type of an injury, some type of maybe an automobile collision, months or years previously. And now all of a sudden, a year or 2 or 3 or 5 or 6 years later, it shows up. Well, if they'd have had it checked out initially, they could have stopped that from a chronic problem developing later on.
Right.
I know we were talking to an individual last night, and he was in a bicycle car accident. And he goes to a chiropractor regularly, and he says he's got arthritis in his neck. Well, that was years ago. Was he in high school, I think, at that time, or college?
Just after, yeah.
Just after. Had that accident. Now he's in his the late 30s, and he's having chronic back problems, having to go to the chiropractor regularly. Well, if it would have been checked out when the accident occurred, those problems could have been identified, and a high percentage they could have been prevented now. So he's stuck with chronic arthritis in his neck and his back because it wasn't properly taken care of back then.
Absolutely.
So
if we look at other vehicle, other vehicle things that you want to document, such as there's a difference between if you've gotten into an accident with one of these small compact cars, or whether you got in an accident with a large SUV or a semi. It's the amount of energy that was put into the accident. I'm speaking as a physicist now, and forgive me for bringing up terms like that. But many times there's a lot more momentum behind that truck. It takes more to slow that truck down than it does that compact car. And if you're the wall that stopped it, that's a lot more of that power, that energy that's going into you and creating injury to yourself or even maybe your car. Before, they used to have cars that were made like tanks. And so in making a car like a tank, they thought that no injury to the car, no injury to the occupants, but they found out that the opposite was true. The less of an injury to the car, the more of the injury to the occupants. And the reason for that was that the car would absorb some of that collision. And in doing so, it saved the occupant from having all that energy going into them. The towing company, you want to have the towing company's name and address. Why? Because it's more of a record of what's gone on in the accident. Just something else, something more of the paper trail to follow. Then we want to look at the other driver, the other driver's information and vehicle information, such as the owner's name and address, the owner's telephone number, the vehicle, the make and the model, and the year of the vehicle. Maybe there were some problems with the brakes with the vehicle in that year, or something that may have caused the accident that wasn't, it's not necessarily the occupant's fault that it happened, or completely their fault. It could be the vehicle that they were driving, maybe. Vehicle color, something to track that down, in order at least to get that down so that there's some kind of a trail. And really, when we were talking about calling the police, making sure that the police call, they know to take down this information. They know to take down this information. So that's always a good second check for what you have, as well as having a list like this in your glove compartment so that you know to do that. License plate number is important also in this case. Insurance company, the insurance company that the person has, the other driver's name, the other driver's address, the other driver's telephone number is important. Dr. Lala, anything else?
Yes, we should talk a little bit more about passenger injuries. Number of passengers in your vehicle, if that's the case, and the number of passengers in the other vehicle. Then police information is very important, such as it's important to collect the officer's name, the department that he or she is serving in of that police department, his or her telephone number, his or her badge number, and other information that may be relevant to the police officer, his or herself. And then witness information is very important too. If there are any witnesses, you want to collect their name or names, their address or addresses, their home telephone number, and of course their work telephone number. And these are all very, very important things in that if this information isn't collected, it slips away. And secondly, you certainly want to exchange insurance information, at least the name of the insurance company and your insurance policy number. Now, in the case of Minnesota, we have what is called a no-fault law, meaning that if I'm in an automobile collision and either I'm the cause of it or the other vehicle or driver of that vehicle is, it means that any medical chiropractic bills then are paid by my insurance company, and then my insurance company seeks reimbursement from the person who hit me. Or if the other person is injured and I'm the cause of the accident, their insurance pays for their care, and then they seek reimbursement from my insurance company. And there's often, I think, it's a good idea to at least seek the counsel of some attorney that you have through a referral, a good reputable, good reputation. Also, there are a lot of facilities, healthcare facilities that are really accident mills, and they're geared to really make as much money as they can from people's insurance. And many times it may not look like that, but they're always out on the edge of I'll call it abuse, but that's, of course, my personal opinion, that they're always out there. They know how to work the system. They know how to play the game of how to maximize how much money or how much services they can perform to maximize the amount of money that they can generate. And sometimes those people who are injured quite seriously and they need extensive care, we certainly see that. But there are other systems out there that are highly abusive, and you cannot blame the defense attorneys for the insurance companies or the insurance companies' claims representatives for looking closely at those facilities. Now, the insurance companies have in their computers and they have systems of recording which doctors, which clinics, which physical therapy facilities, chiropractic facilities, massage facilities have a tendency to be on the very high end of dispensing services. And very often, because of privacy laws, there isn't much the insurance company can do about that other than that they can call for an independent medical examination quite quickly. And sometimes that's abused too by the insurance companies. They just say, well, we're not going to pay anything here, and the person is legitimately injured. And if that's the case and they cut the individual off for payment, then the doctor, the clinic, the physical therapy facility or chiropractic clinic has to decide, are they going to continue to continue to take care of that person and hope that when the case goes to arbitration and or trial, that they will be paid for it. And there are a lot of systems out there where attorneys and medical facilities are kind of too closely related, where they're working the system like that. So it really is important that, and you don't know this because you don't know if I'm a reputable chiropractor or not, or if Dr. Jensen is or not. You just don't know that. And you can go out and if you're a Minnesota resident, you can go out on the Minnesota Board of Chiropractic Examiners website and look up our names to see if there are any infractions against us or stipulations against us or any rulings that the board has made that have judged us have violated some statute or a rule or regulation. But also, you don't really know, because of privacy laws, even if I was under investigation by the Minnesota Board of Chiropractic Examiners, you would not necessarily know that. And so very often we make the mistake of judging a doctor based on how nice they are or their personality. And we should be nice to one another. We really should. We should treat one another the way we'd want to be treated. But a lot of times when you walk into a facility or meet some physician, and they're a backslapper and a big handshaker, and boy, they get a schmoozer type personality. You can pretty well figure a large percentage of those people are not going to really be great physicians. That they're using their personality or their looks to deal with people rather than have a good infrastructure of really being a terrific chiropractic physician or a medical doctor or physical therapist or massage therapist. Anything to add to that, Dr. Jensen?
Well, I'm just thinking about where, when you want to look at the kind of care that you want to have, a lot of times, like you brought up earlier, how the kind of care that a person receives, that you can see down the line whether that injury has continued on. And many times what we're looking at is, say, in the spine, so many times it's due to a fixation of the joints, such as if I had my finger here, I can move it back this far, but that joint still has a lot of movement in it, and we call that joint play, where it can move back much further. Now, I'm not double jointed, but there's a lot of movement within that joint that's there, and so many times a chiropractor will look at that and see about that movement. And the reason why I bring that up is so many times when we have injuries, it's inflammation that's taking place in the joint, and we're trying to remove the irritation within that joint. Mm-hmm. And if that irritation remains, what the body tends to do is start to calcify on there. calcify it, and therefore you end up having a joint that's frozen. And so when you look at even on the medical side of things, they say it's very important to keep motion in the joint. Well, what does a chiropractor do? A chiropractor keeps the motion in there and therefore helps save the deleterious effects of that joint and can keep it from having that arthritis that many times you start to see it within a year, but in 5 years it could be that joint doesn't have any movement at all.
And that brings up, some people will be in an accident and they'll go off to a massage therapist. And it might feel really good, and the massage therapist says, well, you have this fixation and that. Well, that's not going to correct the malalignment of the bone.
Right.
But it feels good. And they're abusing some of them, it looks, excuse me, on the outside, like they're abusing the system too for financial gain. I know there was a gentleman that we know through church activities one of his relatives was in a car accident. It wasn't a real bad car accident. And they decided to go to a chiropractic clinic, very nice looking building in their area of the cities. And we didn't know that or anything, that's fine. And then he tells us that they did a brief history, took some x-rays, and said that she needed 85 treatments in 2 months. Well, how can I determine that? I mean, how could I determine that?
Right.
And then they talked about a certain attorney that they that they suggested that she go to. And then pretty soon they were trying to get all of her rest of the family in under chiropractic care too. And it's not saying that I think everybody does need chiropractic care, to be honest with you. Every spine needs chiropractic adjustments. It just does, regardless if it feels good or not. But,
Honestly.
Yeah, honestly. But to see somebody use a system like that, now, can I file a complaint against that chiropractor with the Board of Examiners? Not really, because it's hearsay. That chiropractor says they need to do that. But now that guy comes to us here after a month and says, gee, the insurance company is sending my relative to IME and they're going to cut him off from care. Well, and so the chiropractor says, well, we'll continue to take care of you, but what I want you to do is sign this bank lien that in case it isn't paid, that you'll have to pay me. And now that's, I guess, good business. But I don't think even if Jesus walked in my office, if I would take that attitude, or if his mother Mary walked in my office, or his father Joseph walked in my office, or any of his brothers or sisters walked in my office, that I would pull that kind of stunt. So again, you got to be careful, because there are all kinds of people out there who are abusing the system. And it doesn't matter if it's automobile accidents, doesn't matter if it's government money, whatever it is, wherever there's money out there, there's going to be a propensity to misuse the system. And I don't blame the insurance claims adjusters and representatives and many of the defense attorneys for looking askance at a lot of these places, because they really know by reputation. They know if Dr. Jensen and I, based on our billings to insurance companies and the type of records we keep and things like that, the type of seminars that we teach, if we really are pretty reputable doctors of chiropractic. So collect the information. We don't want any of you to be in a car accident or anything like that. But if you are, if you've had some injury, even a boating accident, you could go to a chiropractor for that, because many of the boating accident insurance policies work just like, are very, very similar to automobile collision coverage. So think about your body. It's the only body you're going to have. Be careful of slippery, slimy people. Be careful of people who are just run tons and tons of tests, just as well as be very, very careful of those who almost do nothing, just lay down, I'll snap you, I'll crack you. Be careful of them that say, oh, don't worry about it, I'll just take what your insurance says. Be careful of those chiropractors and physicians who give you legal advice as well, too, because that's practicing without a license, really is.